All right, guys, welcome back to the Buck Fever podcast. As always, you're here with Noah and Jake, and today we have another very special guest. So, turkey season is in full swing, and we've been talking a lot about turkey hunting with various guests coming on. But today's guest has a bit of a more unique connection to turkey hunting and the turkey hunting industry, specifically in the turkey call carving industry, which is one that up until recently I admittedly didn't really know too much about. But we are speaking today with I mean, some would maybe say like the king of turkey call carving. Here we have Dave Constantine with us. Dave, how are you doing tonight?
Really good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being here, and this is going to be a super fun conversation here for us because we kind of got connected through a mutual friend, and as soon as I had heard about your work, I knew that we had to check it out and try and reach out to see if you'd come on the podcast. And I mean, immediately from going on your Facebook page and everything, it my mind was blown. You've got some really impressive work going.
Thank you.
So I kind of want to give a little bit of an introduction on our part here. And I know that what you do is a passion, and so it's certainly not all about the accolades or the awards. But to not mention some of them, I think would be doing you a great disservice. So I kind of want to give our listeners a little bit of a feel for what some of your work has amounted to over the years. So Dave was inducted into the Grand National Call Making Hall of Fame. He was an 11-time Earl Mickle Award winner, which is given annually to the top call maker at the Grand National event. And if I'm not mistaken, that was an unprecedented 11 times. I don't think anybody's even come close. And it sounds
That's true.
like, and it sounds like before that, before the Earl Mickle was even a thing, you were a 3-time Call Maker of the Year award winner. And as far as I'm aware, there's probably several hundred other awards that you've amassed over the years that are certainly important, but it sounds like there might be a few too many to fully list here. So I mean, obviously, a huge congratulations on all of those awards. I'm sure it's been a huge honor over the years.
It really has, and I mean, I'll tell you guys early on, I kind of taught myself and started out with, it actually kind of started with a friend of mine way back in the day. I think there was 3 turkey zones in Wisconsin. And he said, Dave, we should put in for a turkey tag. And I don't, if I remember right, there was 18 tags available
Oh,
in
wow.
in zone 3, and we drew 2 of them. And so at that point in time, I had this wild hair that I should make my own call and try to kill a turkey with it. And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's really something.
where do you go about making your own call? I mean, how do you even start with that, with this being a kind of a new thing back in the day?
Well, I had really no clue. And so I thought, well, I don't know why I picked a box call, but I did. I mean, I thought that would be the easiest. I mean, as time went on, I realized those are probably the hardest to master and this call, I'll be honest with you, it sounded like crap. It was terrible. But I actually had a turkey, a gobbler, answered me one morning on this particular hunt very early on, like I said, in the Wisconsin history of Wisconsin's wild turkey reintroduction and subsequently the seasons. And um, I, I was so amazed that this bird actually even answered my call that uh, it, I think at that very moment I was just hooked on the whole idea of making calls and turkey hunting, etc. And I've been doing it ever since. But it was, like I said, I'll repeat, it was a terrible call. I mean, God bless that gobbler.
So, Dave, where are you from originally? You don't have to give us like your home address or anything, but just a general area.
In Durand, Wisconsin. I live about 10 miles from there now. I've actually been in the area all my life. I was in the 70s, I lived in Hawaii for a period of time. I was a commercial fisherman there and then moved back home shortly after. I was in Hawaii like 3 years and then moved back here, been here ever since.
So, legend has it, even though you grew up in western Wisconsin, you saw your first wild turkey when you were in Hawaii. Is that correct?
True. That is true. We used to, I had a friend over there, a Japanese fellow, and he was into hunting, and we used to hunt a lot of Spanish goats and some of the Hawaiian the mouflon sheep and whatnot that were inhabited the mountains of the Big Island of Mauna Kea up in that area. And in the course of being introduced to those kind of animals for hunting, I would notice in the fringes of the jungles up there, there was turkeys. And I inquired about them, and he said, oh, yeah, at the time they didn't even have a season. You could buy, I believe you could just buy a tag and go turkey hunting. And that was literally my first taste of turkey hunting. I killed several, they're Rio Grande subspecies, but I killed several Hawaiian Rio Grande birds at the time when I lived there, yes.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy to us because we've grown up now in a time when turkeys are just absolutely abundant in Wisconsin. So to think that you wouldn't really see any, and then you go to Hawaii of all places, and that's where they're roaming around. That's crazy to us.
One of the interesting things about the Hawaiian turkey is, and a lot of times people don't even think about it. You know, they don't really have seasons in the Hawaiian Islands. I mean, it's a tropical area, and so you don't have spring, summer, fall, winter.
Right.
So what triggers those Hawaiian birds is rain. It seemed like whenever there would be light rains, then they would do the same thing our birds do here in the spring. It was, you know, and so coming off of that as a first-time experience for wild turkeys, I kind of hunted them a little bit strange when I first got back to the States. And actually we couldn't even hunt them when I first got back because there were no seasons except in the far south. So it was kind of interesting that these birds reacted differently to the weather. Of course, like I said, they had no spring season. So they breed all year round there, depending on the weather.
Yeah, I never really would have thought about that.
Makes sense, though, right?
Yeah, it does. Huh.
Right.
So what has your impression been then over the years as there's been more and more and more turkeys and we've developed all the zones and the seasons and everything? What has that been like to kind of watch all of that unfold?
You know, I think Wisconsin has done a really good job with the structure of the seasons. The one that, having hunted turkeys for so many years, one thing I've noticed, and I think that one of the things that would make a person a better turkey hunter is to understand the dynamics of the flock or of the wild turkeys throughout the year. And I think a lot of people don't realize that our birds here actually start breeding in March, in late March. And some years, if we have mild springs, not like this one, which was horrible, but when we have mild springs, there's a probably half or 50% of the breeding has already taken place in late March. And so once you understand that, you need to know then how does that each time kind of period of time transition from breeding to hens nesting or laying and then the hatch, etc. And it'll just make anybody a better turkey hunter if they can understand that. So what I'm saying is there are times when the very first 2 periods in Wisconsin, if you put a hen decoy out, for example, you're going to risk not having success, and there's a reason for that. And when I've given seminars, I say, why would that be? And rarely does anyone have an answer, but it's because the hens have been together all winter, and they know each individual in a given area in that flock or a group or different, or actually small flocks, big flocks. They know each other so well. When they see a strange hen, which is your decoy, immediately, it's not that they think it's fake. They just don't want anything to do with that bird.
Huh.
So to be successful the first part of the season, you're way better off just using a Jake decoy, no hens. And that's what I'm saying. I'm alluding to the understanding the dynamics of the flock and how that progresses throughout the spring will really help you become successful. I mean, once I've learned a lot of this stuff, I mean, it has really, really increased the success of turkey hunting as a hunter, and it would help anyone to know that stuff. I maybe have gotten off the track a little bit here, but I do like talking about that. So
Yeah, no, that's tons of good stuff there, because that's actually something we've been talking about recently quite a bit. Is different
yeah,
hunting tactics, different calling tactics,
yeah.
decoy setups, things like that. But what you're saying, that really makes a ton of sense, and it's probably not dissimilar to deer hunting in that way, where the different time periods throughout the year, deer have different needs and wants and all that stuff. And so if you can understand really what the deer is thinking or what the turkey is thinking or whatever, it makes it a whole lot easier to hunt that bird.
And the reason, guys, I even mentioned that, I was kind of forced into really learning this stuff because I'm not just a call maker, but I'm also a wood carver, and I've probably carved almost all of the masters. In other words, the original wooden decoy that goes to the manufacturer to be made then for the market. So I've done like all of Dakota's decoys, all of Flambeau's, Lucky Duck, and not just their turkeys, but also their waterfowl, ducks, and geese. All these real ultra realistic decoys. So it forced me to kind of do studies with these decoys, and I learned that there are certain decoy presentations for wild turkeys that are very successful, and it's pretty simple, really. So the first 2 periods of the season, you want to only use a Jake decoy. All right. So as you get into 3rd and 4th period, that's when you want to use a hen and Jake setup. You can use a breeder setup, or you can just have a hen and a Jake, or 2 hens and a Jake. And so that 3rd and 4th period that's right in the middle of the season. Then you get into 5th and 6th period, and then it's a single hen only scenario. If you adhere to those rules, your success turkey hunting will really increase. So it's good stuff to know.
So you talk about the seasons now, but when this is kind of a little backtracking, but when you first started and they first opened up turkey hunting in Wisconsin, what were the seasons like back then? Was it, you said there's only 18 tags, so did you just get to hunt for the full 6 weeks, or was it like 3, or how did that work out?
It was, I'm trying to remember. So here's one thing I do remember. Was that you, Noah?
No, that was Jake.
Jake. So if I remember right, what then was first period is now second period.
Okay.
So they've added one in front of that since then. But I remember I think it was like a week, the same kind of structure. There just wasn't a lot of zones open yet, and there wasn't a lot of, I think it was only 5 time periods.
Okay.
Answer your question, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back maybe even a little bit further here, and I want to come back to all this stuff because it's a lot of good stuff, but I don't want to just brush over your time in Hawaii because it's kind of a cool element to your story. So you mentioned that you were a commercial fisherman in Hawaii?
Was, yes, and when I say that isn't any big flamboyant deal. I had a Japanese friend who I mentioned I hunted with and got to know there, and he had a 18-foot V-bottom Alumacraft boat, and we went every day out in the Pacific Ocean, and we would fish for tuna to sell on the fish market, the local fish market.
So was it?
And there were days.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. There were days when the boat would be in the bottom of a swell, and the swell top would be 30 feet above you.
No way.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, but we caught a lot of fish. We did pretty well because in Hawaii there's fresh fish markets everywhere, and so you just catch fish and then you go sell them, and they pay you by the pound. But yeah, that's what I did there.
Wow, were you catching pretty big tuna or just like medium size?
We were not targeting like yellowfins, the real big ones. We were targeting tuna they call skipjack or aku tuna, which run about anywhere from 8 to 20 pounds, and they're readily sought after in the islands as a food source. And of course, the Hawaiians eat a lot of fish. It's raw, sashimis, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that's what we were targeting most of the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't know if it was like the shows you see where they're catching, a couple 100-pounders.
Not like wicked tuna. No, not like bluefins or yellowfins. Not that kind of fishing. No, sir.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you had, probably some days you had some of the most beautiful views in the whole world, and then other days it was pretty rough out there, huh?
Yeah. There's a lot of stories. Yes, sir.
Wow. Yeah, so then you mentioned a little bit about kind of how you got into, call making, whatever. So as you kind of got going then, did it just kind of start as a hobby and then kind of work up from there?
I was making, like I mentioned, I initially just wanted to make a turkey call and go hunt with it. And, kind of, I think, started out pretty normal where, you have friends and family and they go, oh gosh, that'd be cool. Make me one of those. And you do that. And I think where it kind of really took off is on the state level. Every year at the state convention, they started a custom call makers competition. Now, this was not the fancy ones like you've seen some of my decorative stuff, I'll call it. This was a plain Jane working call, and it was just called the hunting division, and I entered a box call, and over the years I won that that hunting division 5 times on the state level. And then I had a couple outdoor writers who got wind of that and wrote some articles back in that time period about my box calls, the original. Some of them are quite famous at this point: the beer belly box, the schooner box, skinny bitch, the she nasty. I mean, all of my box calls are all my original designs. They're not Neil Cost type box calls like probably 95% of the box call makers out there is what they're making a Neil Cost style box. So mine are all original designs. And I think these magazine articles that these writers did at the time kind of gave things a real kick in the rear end, because I mean, I can remember making box calls for months on end just to keep up. But those were all hunting calls, guys. They weren't the 11-time Grand National artistic decorative winners like you had talked about earlier.
Right. Because I think for anybody who hasn't seen your work, it maybe was a little bit confusing there, because you do both. You have like the actual calls that you can take hunting, and then you have calls that you would never, ever in a million years ever take hunting because they're so elaborate, so unique. It could just never spend a second out in the woods.
You said it perfectly. Yeah, I do hunting calls that people can hunt with, and then I call them collector grade decorative calls that are very elaborate. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple scrolling through Facebook and whatever. Just like a flock of turkeys on top of a call, and then there's antlers incorporated. I mean, they've just done some really, really crazy work.
Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
I mean,
crazy in a good way.
Yes, yeah, and that's where things really got popular, at least with me, was graduating into some of these very artistic endeavors, I would call them, but also a functional turkey call. And if people check out my some of my social platforms, they'll definitely see some of the stuff. I mean, and when you say fancy, it is really fancy stuff. Yes.
So going back a little bit on your your first box call, you said that it didn't sound the best. I mean, how many calls did you have to make or adjustments before you found the right one, or were you and a couple guys like trying to figure it out and prototypes, or how did that all go down before you found the one where you're like, this one sounds pretty good?
Took, I would say, until I was satisfied with the experimentation, trial and error, et cetera, like anybody does when they try to do something totally original. I would say it took probably 6-8 years before I had my first design box call that I thought was capable of killing a bird regular basis.
Wow, that's impressive to stick with it that long and persevere till you find something that's worth your while.
But it's so challenging, I never really lost interest, so I just kept plugging away. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, now I have, as far as just hunting calls, guys, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3. I think there's 4 or 5 that are very, very popular. I mean, they are really, really good hunting calls.
Wow. So as you were kind of going along then, kind of finding your way, did you have any mentors or any idols, people that were already in the space that kind of helped you out, or people that you looked up to?
I've been asked that before, and this, you have to realize, back in, I'm going to say in the mid to late 80s, and maybe you guys know this, but there was not a lot of turkey hunters. I mean, it was a really new thing to the state. We were in the process of growing the turkey populations, and like we talked about a little bit ago about structuring the seasons, etc. And so, I didn't really know a lot. So the answer was no until when I started competing on a national basis. I met a gentleman. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Neil Cost?
Nah, it's
I
not
don't
ringing a
think
bell.
so. No.
He's the most famous box call maker on the planet, alive or dead. And if you check into it, he was considered the best hunting box call maker ever lived. Now, he's passed away a few years back, but I had the pleasure of meeting him and becoming friends with him. And he said to me one day, he said, Dave, I want to challenge you to make a one-sided box call without any tapers on the side, straight walls. And so that was one day in Nashville, Tennessee at the national convention over a glass of bourbon, the two of us. And I said, Neil, I'll bring my results next year. I brought them back, and I set this box call down in front of him, and he played it, and he said, "Oh my God," he said, "you did it." And so, as far as anybody that's well known, I guess that'd be the guy to know. And that's about the only guy I knew at the time. So,
Yeah, that's really cool. So then, do you want to cover a little bit about the convention? Because I know that's where a lot of the awards had come from, as we mentioned before, but we haven't really described it too much.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think. I think it was 30, and I never really know the numbers, and I always hate when I'm talking either to on an interview or a writer or something. But 30 some years they've hosted the Grand National Wild Turkey Annual Convention. And what that is a conglomeration of a giant sports show, and then also various competitions that involve the wild turkey, all the way from flat art up to the custom call competition. They have a lot of going on. It's worth checking out. It's really a nice venue. And we're talking a lot of people, like 40,000 people attend this thing every year. So it's big. Now, in conjunction with that, they host the Grand National Custom Call Competition. And that's what I have been competing in up until 2 years ago, which was kind of I just, not officially, but I just kind of decided that I will back off of that competition, maybe retire from the turkey side of things there, which I have done. And you guys we can talk about at some time why, but anyway, that's kind of the story of the convention.
So when you're making these kind of calls, when you make your fancier ones, I'm sure those all take different amount of times for what you're making. But so say if you're going to sit down and make an actual hunting one, what's the time length on that, you think, start to finish for one call?
It's a great question. I don't do any machining, like CNC work. Everything I make, and I pride myself because all of my calls are made custom, and they're all made by hand with hand tools. And so, if I'm sitting down to make like a She Nasty box call for a customer, I'm probably going to be looking at 3 or 4 days from start to finish.
Wow. That's just for one call?
Pardon?
That's just for one call?
Yes.
Wow.
Tooling and everything. They're all handmade, and people have said, well, $150 for a box call. I don't think they realize, there's a lot of time in it. Plus, it's a very, very quality call. And I admit that sounds like a lot of money for when you can go to a sports shop, Shields or Farm and Fleet, and you can buy a box call for $30. Yeah, there's a big difference.
Right, but I mean the time and effort you put into yours is a lot more in your $30 one from Shields, and probably sounds a lot better too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So what about some
That's
of the?
True. Now,
Go ahead.
the decorative calls, that's a whole different deal. It depends on each individual piece. I mean, I've had some that I worked on I had 300 hours in, and I've had 3 months in.
Holy cow.
cow.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask, because those are certainly going to be more than 3 or 4 days or something like that. But yeah, holy cow.
Yeah.
It really does show, though. I mean, when you look at some of these pieces, it's unbelievable. You can tell that a great deal of time was taken to make these things. You couldn't just turn that out in a week or something.
I really enjoy doing them. I plan them out. I have a vision usually. I try to have all of my pieces have a theme, and I don't know if you guys noticed that, but you mentioned like a flock of turkeys on the top of the call. I think you're talking about, it was called Snowbirds, and it was 3 Miriam's gobblers in the snow walking down, like a snowdrift, and then below them was a hen. I probably had, oh my gosh, probably a solid month on that call.
Yeah.
And I should mention the convention every year hosts a grand national celebrity auction, and that where people come from all over to buy these things. I mean, it's kind of a fancy Sotheby's style auction, and most of my pieces haven't been in the auction because they're in the National Wild Turkey Federation's Winchester Museum. So the deal is, if you win this, your piece automatically goes in the museum. But I have had a few pieces that ended up on the auction. And so I've gotten to kind of see both sides of that as I've, throughout the years.
That's pretty sweet. So when you're making these fancier calls, like, where does the vision come from on how to create what you're doing? Or do you think of this all in your head? Do you see pictures? Do you see it when you're out hunting and you think, oh, that'd be cool to put on a call? Or how does that all go down?
Well, some of it comes from hunting, but a lot of it is just, I try to pick a theme, just something that will capture the essence of wild turkeys. Doesn't necessarily have to be the hunting side, but just wild turkeys in general. And so once I get that theme, I'll admit, truly am blessed to kind of have that all already figured out in my head. Not how I'm going to do it, but how it's going to look in the end.
Okay, that's pretty sweet that you can just kind of brainstorm that up and make it look like you do.
Yeah. Yeah, so what kind of wood do you like to use then? Or do you use different materials all the time?
Oh, excellent question. All right. So when it comes to a hunting call, there are certain woods that are very, very good. For example, I'm basically a box call maker, so I think you guys realize that from the conversation here. So I'll talk about box call. And indigenous woods, meaning that they're from the upper Midwest that we're all familiar with, but there's some that are really, really, really good. One is butternut with a cherry lid, butternut with a cedar lid. And so you're looking at two components there. You got the box and then the lid. And then black walnut and cedar are great combinations. Yellow poplar with cherry is a great combination. I don't know a lot about exotic woods, but like some of my friends who make yelpers and turn barrel yelpers and those guys really know these exotics, but the exotics generally are not good for box calls. So some of the wood that grows around trees that grow around Wisconsin, Minnesota, the upper Midwest are all very, very good for making box calls. Now there's some exceptions like oak, red oak, white oak, not that good. And so throughout the years, you kind of experiment and you find the things that work really, really well and you stick to it. Now, when it comes to the decorative stuff, all kinds of components. I mean, from natural deer antler, fossilized stuff, ivory, and then the woods can run the gamut. It depends on what kind of effects you want. If you're just doing natural wood with no painting, things like some of the exotic walnuts and butternut and some of those things are really, really nice. So there's a very, very wide variety when it comes to the decorative side.
So the wood that you're using, it's good because it's both easy to carve and it makes the call sound good?
Okay. No, not really.
Okay.
Not so much easy to carve, but it makes the call sound good. So you had it half right. So when it comes to hunting calls, it's all about the sound. It's all about the combination of woods that make that really sound good.
Gotcha. So then on the decorative pieces, if somebody was to, use those or at least, test it out or something, are those going to sound like what you would say is a good quality call to have in the hunting woods?
Therein lies the whole trick. They have to. One of the criteria is that it has to be able to call a turkey. It has to sound good. And I say therein lies the trick because that is very hard to pull off with these real fancy pieces like I do.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so you touched on it a little bit earlier then too, but it sounds like you don't only carve turkey calls. Is that correct?
Say that again.
You touched on it a little bit earlier, but it sounds like you don't exclusively carve turkey calls. You carve other things as well.
Oh my gosh, yes, yeah. I would say half of my business, for lack of a better phrase, over the last 40 years has been turkey calls and other calls. I make duck calls, goose calls, all kinds of turkey calls, deer calls. But I would say that'd be 50%. The other 50% is doing original wood carvings and sculpture work. I call it very high-end art pieces.
Gotcha. So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the more like elaborate stuff you've done or some of those decorative pieces, whether they're calls or just more sculptures?
Well, they fall into a whole different area for the customer. On the customer side for those, it's generally very, I would call them serious collectors that are collecting specifically high-end turkey calls or duck calls or whatever it is. And also the type of collector that collects high-end artwork. Um, so my background has been as an artist ever since high school, and so I've always been considered myself an artist, specifically sculptor, designer, and wood carver. Some of those pieces, I mean, we're talking. Well, I've had turkey calls decoratives that have sold in the $10,000 range.
Holy cow.
Uh, if that gives you kind of a little idea, yes.
Yeah, that's an idea on how much time and effort it must have taken to put that together.
Right, exactly. And I mean that there are pieces that are in the museum that never did get sold that I'm sure maybe were even more valuable than that. I don't know, but I'm guessing.
Wow. So speaking of some of those that you've made, is there a couple that you're most proud of or have a special place in your heart that you're like, wow, this one's way above all the other ones?
Probably there's two or three that come to mind. One of them um, is a box called Completely Carved out of elephant ivory, the entire thing.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a piece. It really is. And it was its theme was a trout stream in the spring, where a possibly a roost tree right there on the bank of the. So the whole thing is rising trout with turkey feathers floating down the trout stream. No turkeys, just feathers and trout. And it's really quite a beautiful piece. That one comes to mind. Um, I did one several years ago that was the theme was from the Old Testament, and on in the Old Testament the 7 days of creation. On the fifth day, God created all the birds of the land and of the sky. So I did this call called, and the title was "And on the Fifth Day," and it was the hand of God. I carved it out of holly from the painting in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel that Michelangelo did, where he's touching the finger of Adam. It was called the creation of Adam. So instead of Adam, though, I had the carved hand and a gobbler coming off of that, and it's called "And on the Fifth Day," and it's quite a probably reaction wise over the years. That call probably got the most reaction of all of them. Was that particular one?
Yeah, it sounds unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't think I've seen that one on your social media or anything, but I'm going to have to just keep scrolling until I can find it because that sounds
You'll
unbelievable.
find it. Yeah, you'll find it. It's pretty recognizable, but those two come to mind right away. Ironically, I'm doing, or more, I'll say interestingly, I'm doing a takeoff of that call right now that is going to be just an art piece called "And on the Fifth Day." And it's larger, and it's going to be that exact same theme, but not a call, just an art piece.
So you put all this time and effort into these very elaborate ones, and I don't know if there's been some along the line where they don't go as planned, and so what kind of happens if you mess up or you get to a point and you don't like it? Do you start over, or do you just try to incorporate something else into it?
You know, everybody asks me that. Um, I've never had a piece where I've said, that's really, really sucks bad, and I've started over. But I've had pieces where I wasn't happy with things like the composition, like the lines. And my buddy Steve sitting next to me, who also is a very accomplished artist and call maker here from Missouri, Steve Luma. But anyway, he's shaking his head. I've had pieces where I didn't like the flow of the piece or how it would be viewed, and so the negative versus the positive space, that kind of stuff. And so I've kind of had to rework those things. But I've never really had one I've just thrown into the fireplace.
Okay. Wow. So you mentioned earlier how there's certain competitions that you're kind of no longer really entering anymore. You said somewhat of a unofficial retirement. You want to touch on why that is?
Sure, you bet. It's kind of a two-part. First of all, I don't need the competition anymore, and I don't need this to put it down at all. I love it. I love the competition and competing, but I don't need it as far as the accolades thing. And also, I noticed over the last, I'm going to say half a dozen years, that some of the people that were going to compete didn't because I was there. Which sounds really weird, but it was one of them deals. Well, I'll never beat Dave, so I'm not even going to try. And so I kind of would like to see the whole thing keep growing. And so I decided a year ago that I was not going to compete in the turkey side of the competition anymore.
Well, I mean, that sounds... Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a super selfless thing to do to, really benefit anybody who might be new or who wants to keep competing, and, to really allow for the competition to continue to grow and to flourish and all that, and, to kind of put your own, like you said, to put your own accolades aside and kind of, pave the way for others and give them an opportunity. I mean, that sounds like a really selfless thing to do that I think is very admirable.
And along with that, I'm starting to do some week-long workshops here at my studio and shop, and they're really focused on decorative carving and also focused designed for call makers. So we had the first one last year. It was just a blast. Everybody that attended, I think I had 9 students from 7 states.
Wow. Whew. So I was going to ask that too. If somebody wanted to get into carving like this, but they don't have a ton of experience, or maybe they're a student where, they're in art or they're in sculpting things and carving things, and they're kind of, on their way up, maybe, what would be the best way for them to, kind of further their career or get into a little bit? Would it be your workshop?
Definitely. I mean, it's all hands on, and there's so many things that I know from doing this over the years, and then also some of the attendees are so established and savvy that, yeah, it's kind of priceless, really.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean,
Yes.
I guess if anybody's into that, you definitely want to check that out for sure. How many people will you have at any given time? How can somebody get into your program?
Yeah, I have right now. I have the capability of doing like 9 students, and not including myself, so 10 people. I'm working on maybe rearranging my shop a little bit, where I maybe could add another 3 or 4 to that. So I mean, at the most, it would maybe be a dozen. But it's like I said, it's all hands on, and they can, if people follow me on Facebook, I have my regular Facebook page, which is my name, and then I have Constantine Productions, which I try to put most stuff on both of those, so they'd be able to find out when that's occurring. The one coming up this year is going to be in August again, somewhere around the third or the middle of August, somewhere like last year. And you might find this a little strange. I don't charge a dime to do
Wow.
this.
Whew.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a gold mine for anybody who's trying to get a little bit of extra expertise and get some help and some advice on how to get a little bit better at this stuff. I mean, why wouldn't you check it out?
I mean, and my whole purpose, the reason is just to try. Um, we're none of us are going to live forever, and some of the stuff needs to be shared. Um, and I think nowadays, especially with the culture has changed to the point where you don't see a lot of young people with a lot of interest in this stuff anymore.
Right.
So yeah,
So I think I had read somewhere that there's an award given out now in your name. Is that true?
yes. So beginning, it started this past February. Um, it's called the Amateur Call Maker of the Year Award. It's called the Dave Constantine Award, and that has been designated to any new call maker that wins that entire division will receive that award.
So that's pretty sweet in itself, and I'm sure you've experienced a lot of other cool things along your journey. But do you have anything that's been like your favorite part of this whole your whole turkey calling and carving career?
I do, and it's the people. That it's just a wonderful thing to be able to share all the facets of this great sport, wild turkey hunting, not only in Wisconsin but across the whole nation. And then on top of that, when you have other craftsmen and artists and call makers and etc., I mean that you can actually have a venue which you can showcase your work. I mean that to me that's that's the big picture. It really is.
Right. I mean, I can't imagine the cool people you've met along the way who share the same passion you do, which is always fun when you can talk with someone who feels the same about something as you do.
Right.
So
Right.
I take it then, we talked about it a little bit earlier. You must do a fair amount of turkey hunting yourself.
Yes.
Have you? So you've hunted in Hawaii. You've hunted in Wisconsin. Have you done any other hunts for any of the other subspecies, or gone out of state, out of country?
Wife and I, Nancy, we've hunted. Generally, we hunt 4 or 5 states every spring: South Dakota, Nebraska, um, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas, and Wisconsin, of course. I'm not one of these guys that is into the Grand Slams and all that, but I mean we've been hunting 30 plus years in multiple states almost every spring.
Wow. Yeah, and so I'm sure you've got quite a few stories from all of those hunts as well.
Gosh, yes, lots of stories. Yes, some of them are really funny.
Do you
Yeah,
do you have a favorite state outside of Wisconsin?
do I do Nebraska.
Nebraska. Noah and I actually went there last year, and although we didn't kill anything, we had a pretty good time learning and trying to figure out a different species of birds. So
Yeah. So what's your best story from Nebraska?
Oh, gosh, wow. I mean, let me say a couple things about Nebraska. I think Nebraska has what? Don't talk in front of your hand. Oh, I was talking into my hand, I guess.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay. No, a couple things about Nebraska is, first of all, I think it has the best hunting opportunities for turkeys. Number one, it's pretty much over the counter. I know they've tweaked their numbers to 2 gobblers instead of 3, etc. And there seems to be a really good population of birds, and part of that is because of the location of the state. It doesn't have real harsh winters. It doesn't have super hot like down south. And I think it's all advantageous to the populations of wild turkeys. As far as my favorite hunt in Nebraska, I guess I would have to say one that comes to mind is early morning scenario. I'm on a new piece of property that I had asked of. Just knocking on doors. I'd asked the day before, the afternoon before, I'd asked the farmer if I could hunt there, and he said yes. And he said, you can park up here in the feed lot and go down to the creek and get across the creek and up where I wanted to hunt. He said, that's all my land. So I'm going in there kind of cold, although I had seen some birds up on the top on this prairie on his farm. And so it is now pitch dark. I've parked. I've walked down to the creek. I'm looking for a place to cross. I find a deer trail where the deer are all crossing. I get into the creek in my muck boots, which are just knee highs, and I'm okay. It's not a deep creek. And I'm thinking, okay, should I go right up the bank here, or should I go down or up the creek a little ways and then up? And I'm standing there. It's literally pitch dark and it's dead quiet. And I start hearing this plop noise. Something is like you would drop a pebble into the water or a stone. I literally stood there in that creek for 5 minutes trying to figure out what, and so I look up, and this is no kidding, 20 plus longbeards in this cottonwood tree, straight above me, roosted on these limbs, and what I'm hearing is their poop hitting the water.
Oh my gosh.
It was one of those things you're just like, yeah, oh my gosh. Long story short, I slipped up that bank, and the first little opening area right there, I thought, well, maybe someone will fly down here, and I went and set up by another big cottonwood tree, and these gobblers, as it got pink light, are just tearing it up.
Oh wow.
And that fly down, every one of them landed right in front of me. The shot, but that one really sticks out. That was a Nebraska hunt that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds unbelievable.
Was unbelievable. Guys, here's a little side note. After I shot this bird, I went, of course, I had to go back down and cross the creek. And I saw then in the daylight, there were these are giant black cottonwood trees. There had to be over 6 of them along this bank. So I just went up on the bank and started walking along the bank. And there was one cottonwood tree there that had, this is not BS, 4 inches deep of turkey poop.
Wow.
Under the entire canopy of that tree.
That is insane.
Yeah. So one thing that's notable about Western birds, when I say Western birds, Rio Grandes, Merriams versus our Easterns, is they're very flock oriented, and they have what I would call daily roostries. They use the same ones all the time. That's why that's what this area was. That's what had discovered there.
So you'd say if you can kind of find where some of their roost trees might be, that you're gonna increase your odds of success quite a bit.
Western birds, big time. Yes, absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So other than turkeys, do you hunt anything else like deer? Are you into fishing or small game?
Not much small game. We are. I have. I have two passions: wild turkeys and white-tailed deer. And mostly with the deer, mostly with bow and arrow. I mean, I'm a archery guy, and those are my two things. I used to hunt all over. I hunted elk, caribou, all kinds of bear, everything. But at some point in time, a guy just realizes what do you truly love hunting, and it's wild turkeys and white-tailed deer. So,
But if you had to pick one,
oh, that'd be tough.
okay, we won't make you pick one then. We won't do that.
Be tough. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, and we do a lot of fishing. My wife and I are, and interestingly, we're not into bass and stuff. We are big giant bluegill hunters. We look for giant bluegills. That's our thing for fishing.
Gotcha. And obviously, most likely eating then, of course.
Gosh, yeah, there's nothing better.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
you said you're a big bow hunter, especially for deer. Have you shot any turkeys with a bow?
In fact, our first hunt this spring, guys, was my wife Nancy and I, and in Nebraska, we killed 4 gobblers with our bow, and that was during the bow only season there.
Wow. They're, if I'm not mistaken, they open quite a couple weeks earlier than Wisconsin does.
March 25th is their bow opener
Okay.
in Nebraska, and it's
Wow.
bow only. Shotgun season comes in usually 2 weeks after that, I believe. Yeah, but yeah, it's yeah. We had a really good hunt this year in Nebraska with bow.
Yeah, Dave, you should have seen our faces here. We both just looked at each other. Our jaws just dropped because we got our butts kicked so bad in Nebraska last year, and
What area were you guys hunting?
we were like in the what was it? The
About as far west as you can go.
what was the
Oh,
place called though?
Past
Ridge.
Valentine? You
We were in the Pine Ridge National Forest, I want to
Pine
say.
Ridge?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's good turkey ground though. But were you on the res?
I don't. We were just on like a huge public chunk, and we had gone. This was like in what, late May?
Yeah, it would have been like Wisconsin's 5th season, so wrapping up at the end of May.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's getting pretty late for Nebraska. Yes.
right. Yeah, that's kind of what we were thinking. Maybe we'll have to try and head back there and maybe just go a little bit earlier next time.
Actually, Nebraska's earlier, even their bow season is really good. And it does, I will admit, as their season progresses, it seems like the later it gets, the tougher it is in Nebraska.
Would you say
Yeah.
it's the same type of thing here? Because we find it's usually the opposite. We have much better luck the later into the season.
It's the opposite. You're correct. Yeah, here, I mean, those fifth and sixth period gobblers, I mean, they'll commit suicide if you're a good caller.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked a lot about decoys there. Something we've done for the past couple of years here. We've used like just an old turkey fan and kind of set that up, and especially late season when they see that fan, they just absolutely come running. Have you ever tried any of that?
Really, that's a very effective decoy. Just the tail fan. Yes.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable late season. Early season, we don't seem to have any luck with that necessarily, but late season, like
Right.
you said, that's one of their suicide missions there. You give them a couple
Oh,
calls and
oh yeah.
they see that fan and it's
You
over.
got to realize they don't have the hens are all disappeared. Most of them are nesting or already have had their hatch, even by fifth and sixth, some of them. And yeah, so it's one of those deals. You know, I think fifth and sixth season gobblers in Wisconsin, and you guys are right. I think it's some of the best time to hunt, and a lot of people are already they're done hunting by then.
Yeah, we would agree. That's what we look forward to the most, honestly, is those later seasons. I mean, it gets pretty hot and pretty early mornings, but that's when we have the most fun.
Yeah.
We are, and you getting back to your question, as far as archery, bull, bull turkeys, I don't know how many I've shot. I mean, I would say maybe 20 out of 200. So that tells you there's a lot of shotgun turkey, gobblers also.
Yeah,
So,
I'll say that's a whole lot of shotgun gobblers there.
right.
Man. So if people are listening to this podcast and they like what they're hearing and they want to support you or they want to support, just like the turkey call carving industry in general, what would be the best way for people to do that?
Okay, two things. First of all, the National Wild Turkey Federation is a nonprofit volunteer group. A membership, I believe, is $35, and it's a great organization. A lot of really good people. Am I a spokesperson for them? Hell no. But I'm just saying that would be one thing. And then as far as I go, myself, my Facebook page, just Dave Constantine, or my Constantine Productions page will probably take care of about any kind of information or contact wise to get to me. Websites have become kind of obsolete with all of the social media entities, so I no longer have my website, but you'll find plenty on my Facebook sources.
Gotcha. So as we kind of wrap things up here, wind it down a little bit, do you have any final thoughts, any closing arguments here for us?
Closing arguments? No. I I really I'll say that I appreciate you guys reaching out to me. I mean, I think that's really cool that you would even want to talk, want to chat with me. So I'm flattered. I thank you guys a lot.
Yeah, Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure. This is one of the coolest conversations I think I've ever had, and we could probably talk all night and into the wee hours of the morning and still not get sick of it. I mean, this has been a big honor for us, and we just really appreciate you giving us your time. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, and you're welcome. But here's the deal: you guys need to come visit my place here. You'd love it. I have a 100-year-old log cabin that's dedicated to the wild turkey. There's a gallery here with all kinds of stuff, and of course the turkey calls and whatnot. I think you'd get a big kick out of it. I really think you guys would enjoy visiting. Where are you guys located?
Yeah, so we're over on like the other side of the state here, but I actually have some family over closer by you, like the Sparta area. So we're over on that side of the state. Plenty. We can definitely make a trip. No doubt about that.
Sure. Give me a shout and really do that. I think you'd really enjoy it.
Oh, we would absolutely love it.
Okay.
Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on, and we would love to have you back absolutely anytime. This has been an absolute blast, and we've just really enjoyed talking to you here.
Thanks. Likewise, guys. And just holler at me if there's anything I can do. If you want to talk about something else sometime, give me a shout.
Absolutely. Yeah, so for anybody listening here, make sure you go and check out Dave's Facebook page. Like you said, it would be Dave Constantine or Constantine Productions. You definitely have to go and check out the pictures of some of these projects. It's absolutely mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. And just, go show your support that way. And if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be Buck Fever Outdoors. And we're also available on all the social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, TikTok. We're pretty much everywhere. And that would all be at Buck Fever Outdoors. We also have a website, buckfeveroutdoors.com. That's where you can find all kinds of articles, recipes, all of our content you can get to from there. We have a bunch of merch. So if you guys would check all that stuff out, we would really, really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on this video. If you're just listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or something, any 5-star reviews really, really help us out. Those go a long ways. And just thank you guys so much for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you once again, Dave, and we'll see you guys next time.
Welcome. Thanks, guys.